My name is Captain Alana Brooks. I'm 36 years old. I served in the United States Army for 12 years with deployments across Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. 3 tours, 1 medical discharge. No parade when I came home. No medals displayed on the wall. Just a duffel bag, worn boots, and a back that hasn't known rest in a decade. At 12:03 a.m., I stood on the porch of a house I bought with everything I had. $480,000. Every combat paycheck. Every re-enlistment bonus. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself so my family could have something they always said we deserved, a home. It was cold that night. Not the kind of cold that pricks your skin, but the kind that settles inside your ribs and doesn't leave. My duffel was at my feet. I was still in uniform, combat boots laced tight, hat tucked under my arm. And yet somehow I felt completely naked. My father stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes empty. Behind him, the kitchen lights cast long shadows against the floor. My younger brother Zach leaned against the marble countertop, eating chips straight from the bag, like this was just another Tuesday. I remember the sound his chewing. Loud, purposeful, like punctuation. Then it came, the sentence I would never forget. "Get out right now," my father said. "This is a family home, not a shelter for some soldier living off government pity." His voice was like gravel, sharp, dry, final. I didn't respond. I didn't ask why. I didn't tell him the house was in his name because he said it would be easier for the taxes. I didn't remind him that the money came from me, that I had emptied my life savings, my retirement account, even sold the Jeep I rebuilt myself just to make the down payment. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Zach laughed, then just a low chuckle. He didn't look at me, just shook his head and said, "Told you she'd come crawling back." That was the moment I knew I didn't have a home here. Not in the building I paid for. Not in the family I bled for. Not even in the country I served. So I picked up my duffel bag and stepped down from the porch. Not a single person followed me. I walked to the end of the driveway, then kept walking. There was no car waiting, no plan. Just my footsteps and the distant hum of the streetlight above. My fingers curled around the handle of my phone, but I didn't know who to call. Not for comfort, not for help. Instead, I remembered. I remembered where every dollar had gone. I remembered how they came to me 2 years ago with big dreams and empty pockets. My mother had said, "We found the perfect place, Alana. Enough room for all of us. Finally a real home, but we need your help. You've always been the one we can count on." I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. At the time, I was stationed in Djibouti halfway through my 3rd deployment. I barely slept, barely ate, barely survived. And yet when the email came from my mom with the listing 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a backyard big enough for future grandkids, my heart skipped. I sent the money in 2 large transfers. $200,000 from my savings. $180,000 from my retirement. The rest from my investment account I'd been building since officer training. I told them to put the house in their name. I didn't care, as long as it was ours. For the next 2 years, I kept sending money for furniture, for repairs, for a renovation project that apparently turned my old room into Zach's podcast studio. I didn't question it. I was too busy making it back alive. And now, on my first night home, I was sleeping in a borrowed car, with my head against a cold window and my bank account reading $242. At 12:51 a.m., I pulled out my phone again. This time, my hands didn't shake. I scrolled past my mother, past Zach, past the 24 contacts I hadn't spoken to since my academy days. And then I found her. Lena Duval. We met 6 years ago during a joint audit operation between the Army and the Office of the Inspector General. She worked compliance, sharp as a razor. Back then I helped her flag a major procurement fraud involving a private contractor. She told me, half joking, "If you ever need help flipping a script, give me a call." I dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Alana Brooks," she said, voice alert. "That you?" "Yeah. I need to send you some documents. Family trust, property transfers, bank logs. Something's not right." She paused for a second, then said, "Send it. I'll route it up." That was all. 1 call. That's all it took. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't slam a door or burn the house down like they probably feared I would. I just made 1 quiet, legal, precise move and went to sleep in the car with the heater on low, and my jacket wrapped around my knees. At 7:12 a.m., a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to my parents' home. By 7:19 a.m., agents with jackets labeled FBI stepped out and walked toward the front door. By 7:21 a.m., my father opened the door. He didn't even have time to change out of his robe. Zach was still in bed. My mother was making coffee. They turned pale before the first question was even asked. I watched from the gas station across the street, sipping a lukewarm cup of instant brew. They had mocked me for being a poor soldier after I spent $480,000 to buy them a house. They forced me out at midnight. I didn't fight back. I just made one call. And now everything was too late. Because some battles don't require bullets. They just require truth and timing. And I had both. People often assume military service is all about battles, but the truth is, most of it is routine. Structure, precision, repetition. For 12 years, I lived in a world defined by orders and outcomes. No room for emotions, no time for self-pity. I didn't join the army to prove anything. I joined because I needed to leave. I was 19 when I left home. One backpack, one ROTC scholarship, and no plan except anywhere but here. West Point was brutal, mentally, physically, emotionally, but for the first time I was in an environment where discipline was rewarded, not resented. My first deployment was to Iraq. I learned to sleep through rocket sirens and to smile through sandstorms. My second tour took me to Afghanistan, where I worked logistics and learned how supplies moved faster than truth. My third was in East Africa, focused on stabilization operations and asset recovery. That's where I started noticing patterns numbers that didn't match paperwork, contractors overcharging, missions delayed because someone was skimming from the top. I filed reports. I followed the chain of command. I did it by the book. Back home, no one asked about my tours. Every time I flew back for leave, my mother would meet me at the airport with a smile and a question. Did you remember to pack something nice to wear? Something feminine. She'd adjust the collar of my uniform like it embarrassed her. Then she'd glance at my hand and ask, "Still no ring, huh?" My father didn't say much. He'd nod, ask if I wanted coffee, then go back to his recliner. Zach, my younger brother, barely looked up from his phone. I became background noise in my own family, like an old photograph no one had the heart to take down, but no one cared enough to dust off either. I never brought up the firefights, or the injuries I'd seen, or the friends I'd lost. I just answered their questions, small talk, superficial. I knew better than to bring depth to a dinner table that only served comfort. But even if they didn't value my service, I still tried to be useful. When Dad's business was struggling, I sent money every month. When Mom's back surgery wasn't covered in full, I wired the difference. When Zach wanted to switch majors for the third time and needed help with tuition, I paid it quietly. I didn't expect parades. I just wanted to belong somewhere. I thought family was supposed to be that place. It wasn't. My mother has this way of speaking that makes you feel like you're disappointing her even when you've done nothing wrong. It's a tone soft but sharp, a sentence shaped like a compliment but delivered like a wound. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. When I was 12, she told me, "Alana, you're strong. That's good. But strength is only attractive when it knows how to soften." When I got promoted to captain, she asked, "That's great, honey. But do you think maybe men get intimidated by that?" She didn't mean to hurt. At least I don't think she did. I think she genuinely believed she was guiding me toward what she considered a better life, a more acceptable life. She believed in appearances, in curated perfection, in the idea that family should look good, sound good, behave well at cookouts, and never talk about things that make others uncomfortable. So when she came to me about the house, she made it sound like an invitation, like a homecoming. "We found this beautiful place, Alana. It's in the suburbs. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a wraparound porch. Enough room for when Zach gets married and for you if you ever, settle down. But the mortgage is a little high. Your dad and I can cover part of it. If you could help with the rest, it would finally feel like a home, for all of us." I was overseas when she asked, Djibouti to be exact. I hadn't slept in 36 hours, had just come off a convoy escort that went sideways because of a communications blackout. But I read her email and stared at the photos she attached. The house looked peaceful, white siding, blue shutters, a big tree out front. It reminded me of something out of a childhood dream I barely remembered. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money 2 days later. $200,000 from savings, $180,000 from retirement, and another $100,000 over 6 months for renovations and furnishings. All in my parents' name because that's what Mom said would keep things simple. I never once thought to ask for my name on the deed. Not because I didn't care, but because I trusted them. Because I believed that blood meant something. Because I still thought that maybe, just maybe, my sacrifices had earned me a place at the table. I watched from a distance as the house came together. New windows, fresh paint, a backyard patio. Every now and then Mom would send me a picture and say, "We're making it our own." That phrase, it should have tipped me off. I came home 6 months later, discharged after a roadside IED, left me with back damage and hearing loss in my left ear. I wasn't bitter. I was ready to rest. To start a new chapter. I called ahead, told them I was arriving early. Mom said she'd be home. When I got there, the locks had been changed. Zach answered the door wearing gym shorts and a smug smile. He barely said hello. Just told me Mom's in the kitchen. She'll explain. She did. Kindly, firmly, casually. The house feels crowded now. You've been gone so long we had to settle into a rhythm. Maybe it's best if you find your own place. I didn't argue. I just nodded. She hugged me at the doorway and said, "You'll find your path again, Alana. You always do." As I stood there watching the door close, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. This house was never mine. And neither was this family. I had paid for a dream. They had turned it into property, and I had no claim, no key, no seat at the table. When I finally came home, it wasn't in the way I imagined. I didn't arrive triumphantly with bags of medals or warm hugs waiting. I came home because my body couldn't do it anymore. A cracked lumbar disc, nerve damage, partial hearing loss on the left side. They called it a medical separation, honorable but final. I didn't tell my family everything. I didn't want pity. I just said I was coming home for good. My flight landed early. I rented a car from the airport, drove the familiar road out of habit, letting the streetlights blur past. It felt surreal. I'd seen this place in my mind every night in the desert. Now it looked smaller, colder. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the car lineup had changed. Zach had a new BMW. Mom's SUV had a vanity plate now. Dad's old truck was gone. I walked up to the front door, key in hand. It didn't fit. I tried again. Still nothing. I stared at the lock, then at the porch light, then back at the door. I knocked. It took a full minute before I heard footsteps. The door creaked open, but only a few inches. Zach stood there in mesh shorts, no shirt, holding a protein shake. "Alana," he said as if surprised. I raised my brow. "Can I come in?" He didn't answer right away. Just stepped aside slowly and muttered, "Mom's in the kitchen." I walked in. The house smelled like cinnamon and new carpet. The walls had been painted a shade of pale gray. A huge abstract canvas hung over the fireplace where the family photos used to be. It was modern, sterile. Nothing like what I remembered. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like an Airbnb with a lived-in refrigerator. I turned left, heading toward my old room. The door was gone. The room itself had been gutted. The carpet was ripped out, replaced with hardwood. My bed, my dresser, my bookshelf gone. In their place was a standing desk ring, lights, a camera tripod, and a wall painted green for chroma keying. Zach's voice trailed in behind me. "Casual. I use it for content creation now. Podcasts, video, essays. You know." I didn't respond. I walked back to the kitchen where my mother was placing dinner rolls into a bowl. She didn't flinch when she saw me. "You're early," she said, without turning around. "The base cleared me faster than expected," I replied. She nodded, then wiped her hands with a towel and offered a forced smile. "You look tired," she said. "Rough flight." I looked at her for a long moment. "I need a place to stay, Mom. Just until I figure things out." Her smile faded. She looked down at the towel in her hands, folding and unfolding it. Then she said the sentence that stuck with me longer than any wound ever did. "You can stay for a few days. But the house has a rhythm now." I spent the next 2 days in limbo. I slept on the pull-out couch in the den, surrounded by storage bins and Zach's shipping boxes. No one offered to clear a real room. No one asked how my back was. No one seemed curious about why I limped when I walked. or why I flinched at loud noises. They had built a new world in my absence, a world where I didn't fit. Meals were awkward. Mom made sure to serve food in perfect portions, arranged like magazine spreads. But the conversations felt empty. Dad barely spoke, unless it was about property taxes or Zach's growing online brand. Zach talked about himself mostly. He had a podcast now, an affiliate deal with a vitamin company, and a girlfriend named Shay, who had a tattoo of a sword down her spine. On the third evening after dinner, I offered to do the dishes. Mom declined. Instead, she asked me to sit in the living room. The tone of her voice made my spine stiffen. That tone, soft, measured, deadly. She sat across from me, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. Dad stood behind her, silent. Zach was upstairs blasting music. She began with a compliment. "You've always been the responsible one, Alana. So organized, so independent." Then the turn. "But we've developed a system here. We all have our routines. Zach works late hours. Your dad and I get up early. It's just, the house feels different now, and it's important to keep the peace." I nodded slowly. "Are you saying you want me to leave?" She didn't blink. "I'm saying this house is full. Temporarily, of course. But yes, we think it's best." I stared at her for several seconds, then at Dad. He looked at the floor like it might offer him escape. "You asked me to help buy this place," I said calmly. "You said it would be for all of us." Mom's tone didn't change. It was for the family. "And you've been gone a long time, sweetheart. Life doesn't pause." I swallowed hard. "I don't even have a room." "We made decisions while you were away," she said. "That's not anyone's fault. So where exactly should I go?" "There's a motel a few blocks over," she said gently. "Just until you get back on your feet." It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the ease with which she said them. Like evicting me was as casual as recommending a dry cleaner. I stood up slowly, my joints stiff from the couch, my head buzzing. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "I see." Mom stood too, walked me to the door. She opened it wide, the porch light casting a yellow pool on the concrete. As I stepped outside, she touched my arm lightly. "You're strong, Alana. You'll figure it out." Then the door shut behind me. And for the second time that week, I stood alone on that porch. But this time I didn't feel shocked. I felt something colder, cleaner, resolved. As I walked back to the driveway and reached for my phone, I didn't scroll blindly. I knew exactly who I needed to call. Not for revenge, for clarity, for truth, and maybe for justice. You don't just wake up one day and realize your family doesn't love you. It's not an explosion, it's a slow leak. 1,000 little signs that whisper before they scream. And I heard those whispers for years. I just chose to pretend they were wind. I remember the Thanksgiving after my first deployment. I had flown home straight from Kabul, still smelling of diesel and dust. At dinner, my mother passed the turkey, but not before saying, "You know, Alana, maybe next year you'll bring home a man instead of a medal." Everyone laughed, except me. Then there was Zach, my younger brother, her golden child. He crashed his car sophomore year drunk. I covered the repair bills and the fine. I didn't even get a thank you. But I did overhear Mom say Zach's just figuring himself out. Alana always had her little army paychecks to fall back on. They made jokes about me like I wasn't even in the room. "Don't ask Alana to pick the movie," Dad said, "once she only watches war documentaries. She might start crawling on the floor." Even when I sent money, always through Mom, no one ever acknowledged it. When I asked how the mortgage was going, she'd reply, "You wouldn't understand. These are grown-up things. Grown-up things." Like my 3 deployments didn't count as adulthood. I began noticing the mail. Letters I sent went unanswered. Birthday cards for Zach returned unopened. Once I flew home for a surprise visit. I stood on the porch for 15 minutes before Mom opened the door and said, "Oh, we thought you were in Iraq again." That was 3 months after I'd come back. At one point, I started to think I was the one imagining it. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe they loved me in their own way. That's what people always say when they don't want to admit the truth. But love doesn't ask you to disappear. Love doesn't wait until you're thousands of miles away to start using your money. When I wired that $480,000 for the house, I did it out of trust. Mom said this house will finally bring us together. It'll be our place. I pictured barbecues, laughter, maybe even quiet mornings with Dad on the porch. But the first time I visited after the sale, my key didn't work. She said the lock was changed for security reasons. That was when I started to feel it deep in my bones, the chill of being uninvited from your own life. And yet I told myself, they're just adjusting. I believed it so much I became blind. Until I saw the name on the mailbox one day. It didn't say Brooks anymore. It said Zachary S. Brooks and Elaine D. Brooks. No Alana. Still, I stayed silent. I kept giving. Even after Mom joked to her friends at a family gathering, we always knew Alana would come in handy someday. Military girls don't need much. I laughed along. I should have screamed, but I didn't. Because when you've been trained to survive war, you think you can survive anything, even a slow betrayal. I couldn't sleep the night they kicked me out. Not from grief, not from shock, from clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't making excuses. I wasn't rewriting their cruelty into misunderstanding. I was just still. And that stillness let the pieces fall into place. I booked a cheap motel room 15 minutes from my house, and sat at the little desk with a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like cardboard. I opened my laptop. My military backpack was the only luggage I had, and inside it was every important file I'd saved over 12 years, including the wire transfer receipts. $480,000, sent over 5 years, not in one go. It started small, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, for the foundation Mom had said, for the down payment, for the new water heater, for Zach's student loans. He needs help if he's going to finish college. I always said yes, because I thought I was building something we'd share. But that night I organized every transfer, opened my online bank archive, and started a spreadsheet. That's when it hit me. Every payment I'd sent had gone to accounts in my mother's name alone. None in joint accounts, none in my father's, none with my name listed, no co-ownership filings, no joint titles. I opened the county property records. I'd never checked before. I trusted them. I didn't need a contract, this was family. But the house, our family home, was listed solely under my parents' names. Purchased 5 years ago, paid in full, no mortgage. There was no trace of me. I wasn't even listed as a resident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. I stared at the screen for a long time. My reflection, faint in the glass, looked tired but unshaken. This wasn't betrayal that exploded. It was betrayal that had been filed, documented, notarized, and archived. They had planned this, piece by piece, gently, professionally, and thoroughly. And I had walked into it with open hands. I thought about calling them, about yelling, about showing up the next morning with every receipt and demanding answers. But what would that do? They knew. They made this choice. Instead, I leaned back in the motel chair and whispered to myself, "Don't fight. Don't beg." I opened a blank document. I started drafting a summary of every transaction. Then I logged into a federal reporting site and made one call, not to my parents, not to Zach, to a woman named Special Agent Marissa Klein, who I'd met briefly during a base audit in Arizona 3 years ago. At the time, she told me, if you ever spot misuse of federal money, anything that smells off, call me directly. That night, I did. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. And she listened. The clock read 3:07 a.m. I sat with my back straight, both hands resting on the edge of the desk phone unlocked in front of me. My thumb hovered over the contact. Marissa Klein, Special Agent, Financial Crimes Division. I tapped call. It rang once, then twice. Then I heard her voice, groggy but alert. "Klein, this is Captain Alana Brooks. We met in Arizona 3 years ago. You said if I saw anything that didn't sit right." Silence for a beat. Then, "Yes, I remember. Talk to me. I've been sending money to my family over the past 5 years, nearly $500,000, all from my military compensation, all intended to support a home I was told we were building together. But I discovered last night the house is entirely under their names. No mention of me, no stake, no rights. Do you have records? I have everything, transfers, emails, messages requesting the money. I just checked the property records myself. Paid in full, no mortgage. They've locked me out." Another silence, a deeper one. "And all the payments came from your official accounts, your service pay." "Yes, some tied to my deployment bonuses, and they knew. They phrased it like emergencies. education, health, renovation. It looked like family support, but it wasn't. Her voice lowered, sharpened. Captain Brooks, are you in immediate danger? No. I'm not calling for protection. I'm calling for truth. Another pause. Then, send everything. Today. Include a summary timeline and your authorization for us to investigate. I closed my eyes. I already drafted it. I could hear her tapping keys. She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say, that's awful. That's why I called her. She didn't pity. She acted. I'll get back to you soon, she said. This isn't small, but we don't treat financial betrayal as background noise anymore. Not when it crosses federal lines. I ended the call. No anger, no tears, no satisfaction yet. Just one simple thought. They think I'm powerless. They think I'll vanish. But I've always known how to hold a line quietly, precisely. And I'd just drawn one. It started with a knock, not a bang, not shouting, just 3 deliberate knocks. Calm, composed, federal. I wasn't there, of course. I didn't need to be. The 1-bedroom apartment I'd found after they kicked me out had terrible insulation, but the light poured in every morning like it had something to say. That morning, I let it. My phone vibrated once, then again, then rang. It was Marissa. Brooks, it's happening. She didn't need to say more. She forwarded a link. Local news. Breaking federal agents raid suburban home in ongoing financial fraud investigation. The address was mine, or had been. I turned the volume up on the video embedded in the article. There it was, my family's perfect house, with its red-painted shutters and the custom landscaping Mom insisted on. A row of black SUVs lined the curb. Men in windbreakers moved with practiced urgency. One held a clipboard. Another carried an evidence box. Dad stood on the porch, hands raised pale as the siding behind him. Mom was half sobbing, half arguing with an agent who didn't flinch. Zach wasn't visible, likely hiding or worse, trying to frame the story. The anchors were speculating about military benefits, fraud, unauthorized acquisition of federal housing support, and misrepresentation of legal ownership. They were guessing, but not wrong. It hadn't taken long. Once I submitted the compiled records, every bank transfer, every annotated text, every email using words like, trust me, this is your legacy, and just sign here, Marissa's team acted quickly. The ownership structure of the house alone was suspicious enough: 0 contributions from my parents, full ownership in their names, and no paper trail indicating any form of repayment, rent, or gift acknowledgement. But it wasn't just the house. Apparently, while digging, the agents uncovered other discrepancies. My father claiming veteran-related deductions he wasn't entitled to. My mother applying for multiple dependent support grants, using my name without consent. Zach's university financial aid applications, falsely stating he was a dependent of a disabled veteran. What they didn't know, what I didn't even know until the investigation pulled it forward, was how deep the fabrication ran. They'd used me, not just emotionally, not just for shelter, but to build a house of cards entirely on my service, my records, my sacrifice. And now it was crumbling. Reporters swarmed the sidewalk. Neighbors peeked through curtains. One shouted something I couldn't hear. The video cut just as my mother in a bathrobe was escorted into a black vehicle. I didn't watch it again. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just stared at the still image that followed the porch, empty door ajar, the flag I'd once gifted them half-folded and resting on the steps. A relic of someone they used to know. A symbol they misused. The military doesn't teach you how to feel about betrayal, but it teaches you clarity, procedures, protocol, restraint. They taught me how to carry a wounded soldier without breaking down, how to write letters to families I'd never meet, how to hold my voice steady under fire. And now those same skills let me walk through this without a single scream. The house I paid for had been turned into a lie. Now it was a crime scene. I'd spent 12 years learning how to serve something bigger than myself. And somehow I'd brought that discipline back home, not to war, but to truth. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. I never intended to speak to them again. But the FBI needed statements. And part of me, still human, still aching, wanted answers. Wanted closure, even if it came wrapped in denial. The first call was from my mother. I didn't answer. She left 6 voicemails in the span of an hour, each one with a different tone. The first was pleading, the second confused, the third accusing, By the sixth, she was sobbing. It's all a misunderstanding, Alana. They're making it bigger than it is. You know we never meant to hurt you, but they did. Over and over. That night I received an official request from the legal team. We're arranging interviews with family members. We recommend you remain available for cross statements. So I agreed. It wasn't at my apartment. It was neutral ground, a beige government building with buzzing lights and windows that didn't open. A place designed for facts, not feelings. I sat in a small room. Glass window on one side, a folder in my lap. I didn't touch it. They brought in Zach first. He looked thinner, edgier, still in designer sneakers, though some things never changed. He sat across from me, arms crossed like it was high school again. You think this is justice, he snapped. You ruined our lives because you couldn't take a joke. You were always dramatic. A joke, I said nothing. Let the silence press against him. I didn't even know Dad used your papers. That was between him and Mom. I was in college. Which I paid for, I said quietly. He flinched. You think I asked you to know? You just accepted it without question. Like everything else. He leaned back. You're not perfect either. You think just because you wore a uniform, you get to act like some moral judge? I met his eyes. No. I think because I wore a uniform and followed every rule, I deserved not to be stolen from by my own blood. He had nothing left to say. They brought in Mom next. She entered with a calm facade. Lips pursed, hair, done as if image alone could salvage meaning. Sweetheart, she said before even sitting. I know this looks bad, but families do things for each other. That house, it was supposed to be ours. Yours too, of course, but for all of us. You signed your name over mine, I said. That wasn't unity, that was theft. She smoothed her blouse. You never said you wanted your name on it. I didn't think I needed to. I thought we trusted each other. She shifted. We were just trying to build something. You were always gone. We had to take care of ourselves. By rewriting legal documents behind my back, she didn't answer. Then she reached for my hand instinctively, habitually, but I pulled back. Did you ever mean to give it back? I asked. The house, the money, the credit cards I paid off. Did you ever think to return anything? Her eyes welled up. No, she whispered. At least it was honest. Then came Dad. He didn't sit. He paced. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Government sticking their nose in family business. What happened to privacy? What happened to respect? Respect, I repeated. You told me to get out of my own house. He slammed a fist on the table. Because you came back here expecting gratitude. You wanted to be treated like a hero, but you weren't. You were just a soldier with a wounded leg and a martyr complex. My stomach twisted. I stood. Looked him in the eye for what felt like the first time in years. I didn't ask to be a hero. I asked to be treated like a daughter. He stopped pacing. For a moment, the air between us hung heavy with everything we never said. Then he scoffed. You think this makes you better than us turning us in? No, I said. It makes me free. They escorted him out. I stayed behind alone in the interview room for several minutes. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but all I felt was empty. Not because I doubted the decision, but because justice, no matter how overdue, never fills the hole betrayal leaves behind. Still, it was done. They knew what they did. And I, for the first time in my life, had no more weight to carry that wasn't mine. In small towns, stories don't travel, they ignite. By the time the second FBI vehicle pulled out of our cul-de-sac, the neighborhood was already buzzing. People stood behind curtains watching, but pretending not to. I knew the pattern well. I'd grown up among these manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, among whispers passed during block parties, and judgment disguised as concern. But this time, they weren't whispering about me. By morning, our family name was in headlines. Retired military officer exposes familial fraud. Veteran's family accused of misappropriating funds. It was in national syndication within 2 days. The twist was too irresistible for the media-decorated soldier betrayed by her kin, remains silent, then delivers justice through legal means. I didn't ask for the coverage, I didn't relish it, but I didn't stop it either. Reporters camped outside the house I paid for. A house now cordoned off with crime scene tape at the back entrance, and an under investigation sign pasted on the door. I heard my mother's voice on the local radio station trying to explain. She's our daughter. We never imagined things would turn out this way. But the world wasn't buying it. Neighbors who once sipped wine with my mother now pretended they didn't know her. My father, who once ran for the neighborhood board, was removed from all community leadership groups. HOA issued a formal statement of disassociation. Zach's job at the real estate firm suspended him indefinitely. Apparently, clients were uncomfortable doing business with someone being investigated for conspiracy to defraud a veteran. One afternoon, I passed by the old church we all used to attend. Pastor Graham saw me, stepped outside, and nodded solemnly. "We've all heard," he said gently. "I just want you to know you didn't do anything wrong, Alana." That simple validation broke something in me. Because for so long, I'd carried this invisible shame. As if I had failed my family by not being the daughter they wanted. As if their silence and absence of affection meant I needed to change. Now I realize they were the ones who had worn masks. People wrote letters. Veterans from across the country reached out online. Some said they'd been through similar betrayals. Others simply thanked me for choosing justice without vengeance. One message stayed with me: you didn't destroy your family. You uncovered the truth they built their lies upon. But not everyone was sympathetic. A few voices, usually anonymous ones on the internet, accused me of going too far. That family is sacred. That blood should be protected no matter what. I didn't reply to those. I didn't need to, because I knew what sacred meant. I'd watched men and women die defending it, and I knew this wasn't vengeance. This was consequence. My family's world unraveled not because I tore it apart, but because they'd built it on deception and thought I'd never notice, thought I'd keep paying, keep nodding, keep stepping aside. What none of them understood was this: silence is not consent, and compliance is not love. They gambled on my loyalty. They lost. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one carrying shame. They were. You'd think I'd feel victorious. I didn't. I remember sitting alone in the small apartment I had rented 2 towns over. The floor still smelled of new carpet. My uniform hung untouched in the hallway closet. The headlines were still spinning, the notifications still pinging. But me, I was just sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the silence. There was no music, no champagne, no cheers. Only stillness. And inside that stillness, a strange, unfamiliar quiet in my chest. Not happiness, not pride, just weightlessness. As if the armor I had worn for years, built from silence, duty, and forced humility, had finally slid off. It wasn't a clean break, more like an ache easing. I didn't hate my family. I don't think I ever did. Even after they betrayed me, humiliated me, pushed me out of a home I paid for, they were still the people who shaped me, for better or worse. My mother's voice still echoed in my head when I folded towels a certain way. My father's footsteps, measured and firm, were the same cadence I marched to for years. Zach's jokes, even the cruel ones, had trained me to develop thicker skin than most of my commanding officers ever could. But just because someone helped form you doesn't mean they deserve to keep you. I had spent so many years hoping they'd see me. Not the uniform. Not the medals. Me, the little girl who once made them birthday cards with crayons. The teenager who mowed lawns all summer to pay for Zach's football camp. The woman who answered every deployment order with steady hands because she thought keeping them proud was more important than keeping herself safe. But they never saw me. Only what I could give: money, image, silence. When I made the call that day, it wasn't a move in a game. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. For the first time, I saw things as they were, not as I hoped they could be. My therapist once told me closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. She was right. I never got an apology. Not from my mother, who claimed I overreacted. Not from my father, who insisted everything was a misunderstanding. And definitely not from Zach, who called me a narcissist on Facebook before his account went dark. And that was okay. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't want their shame. I just wanted distance. I started sleeping through the night again. No sudden wake-ups. No dreams of standing outside my own house with a bag in hand. I went back to school, took evening classes in forensic psychology. Not because I wanted to chase justice for others, but because I was finally curious about things that had nothing to do with my family's approval. I planted herbs on my balcony: basil, thyme, mint. Things that grew with water and light, not pressure. Sometimes on quiet mornings, I'd make coffee and think about the years I lost trying to earn love that had always been conditional. I'd feel sad, not regretful, just mournful. Like remembering a home that burned down before you knew what it meant to feel warm. But even in that sadness, there was space. And in that space, I found myself. I didn't win. I didn't want to win. What I wanted was peace. And strangely enough, I had it. Not because the FBI raided my parents' home, not because people took my side, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink to make others comfortable. I didn't silence myself to protect the reputation of people who wouldn't have done the same for me. That was my victory. It didn't come with applause. It came with breath, free, unshaken. Finally mine. I never planned on moving to the woods. But that's where I ended up, a single-level cabin nestled just outside of Asheville, where the air smells like pine and morning mist, and the silence wraps around you like an old quilt. It wasn't big. Just 2 rooms and a kitchen. But it was mine. Paid for in full, no co-signers, no family name on the deed. The first morning I woke up there, I didn't hear traffic. No yelling through thin walls. No Zach's bass thumping through shared ceilings. Just the birds, just the wind. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor, coffee in hand, and opened the door to a porch that faced nothing but trees. I stood there in my flannel shirt, hair unbrushed, and watched 2 deer cross a clearing like they owned the earth. That was the first time I cried. Not because I was sad, but because it finally hit me, I was safe. I had always lived in places meant for someone else: government housing, shared quarters, barracks, then the house I bought but never owned. Here the floor creaked under my weight like it knew I was real. The walls didn't judge me. The kitchen didn't care if I cooked for one. I started building things. Raised a garden bed, hung shelves, learned to replace a pipe under the sink from a YouTube video, and celebrated like I'd won a medal. Each small task healed something bigger. I planted sunflowers near the back fence. My mother used to hate sunflowers, said they were messy, scattered. That made me love them more. Watching them bloom felt like reclaiming parts of myself I didn't know had been buried. I wrote letters I never mailed. To my parents, to Zach, to the girl I used to be who begged to be enough. And every night before bed, I lit a small candle near the window, not for anyone else to see, just as a ritual. A way to say, today, I lived on my terms. Healing wasn't loud. It didn't come with grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. It came in tiny, quiet choices. Buying a second mug, not because someone was visiting, but because I wanted to believe someone might. It came in allowing myself to sit still without guilt. In learning to love solitude without mistaking it for loneliness. In building a home, not just a house where every wall whispered, "You belong here." For the first time in my life, I believed it. And that made all the difference. It arrived on a Wednesday. No return address, just my name in Zach's handwriting, too careful, like he practiced before writing it. The envelope was creased as if he had carried it around for days before finally mailing it. I sat with it for a long while, unopened, staring at my name written by the brother who once laughed as I was thrown out of my own house. I opened it eventually, not out of curiosity, but because I needed to know how far he'd go to rewrite the past. "Dear Alana," it began. Not sis, not hey, just formal, unfamiliar. He wrote that things had changed since I left, that the house was quiet, heavier somehow, that our parents barely spoke to each other now. He wrote that he was sorry for the words he didn't say, and even more for the ones he did. He said he hadn't realized what I gave up for him, that he was too young, too wrapped up in his own ambition to see that my silence was never weakness. "I didn't understand the cost of your sacrifices," he wrote. "Now I do, and I'm ashamed." He told me he'd graduated, found a job in another state, and that no one asked him to stay. He ended the letter with a line that struck harder than the rest. "If you ever want to talk, just talk. I'd be grateful." I folded the letter neatly and tucked it back into its envelope. And then I placed it in the top drawer of my desk between a field journal and an old military coin. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't respond either. Forgiveness is complicated. It's not something I owe him, not yet, maybe not ever. He apologized, yes, but for himself, for his conscience, for his healing, not for mine. And I wasn't angry anymore. Not really, I was just done carrying their weight. My silence wasn't revenge, it was freedom. I went back to my garden that afternoon, barefoot in the grass, letting the soil ground me in the present. The sunflowers were turning toward the sun. I didn't need closure from Zach. I had created my own. That letter still sits in the drawer. Some days I read it again, and every time I feel less of the old ache. It's not because I've forgotten. It's because I finally learned how to live without needing their approval. There's a sound the forest makes when everything else goes quiet. It's not silence, not really, it's breath, whisper, motion. I hear it now as I walk alone through the trail behind my cabin. The pine needles crunch gently beneath my boots, and the wind brushes against the trees like it remembers I'm here. Not to fight, just to be. 12 years ago, I wouldn't have understood this kind of stillness. I measured worth in deployments, medals, and bruised ribs. I thought strength had to be earned through pain. But peace was earned by letting go. Letting go of their voices, of my need to be welcomed back, of that night at 12:03 a.m. when I stood on the porch of a house I paid for, and heard my own father say, "Get out right now." And I did. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just walked away and made one call. That was all it took. No vengeance, no weapons, just truth finally unburied. I am not proud of what they lost. I'm not happy about the headlines. But I didn't lie for them. I didn't carry their shame anymore. I didn't need a battlefield to fight back. I just needed the truth and my voice. And now when people ask, "Did you get justice?" I smile soft and sure and say, "I didn't get revenge. I just stopped being silent." And that somehow was enough. Sometimes I replay that night like a training film in my mind. The night I was pushed out of my family's house, wearing the same uniform I wore when I pulled soldiers out of burning wreckage. When my mother stood in the hallway with folded arms, my father looked past me like I was furniture, and Zach, my brother, laughed with a glass of wine in his hand. 12 years of service, 3 tours, $480,000. And they said it wasn't my home. I remember how heavy my bag felt that night. Not because of its weight, but because I knew without a word that something in me had broken for good. The kind of break that doesn't bleed, just quietly splits. But I also remember what happened 3 days later. Stepping through the front door of this cabin for the first time. The wood smelled like pine and varnish. The kind of smell that told you this place was meant to be lived in slowly. No one's voice echoed through the hallway. No reminders of what I wasn't. Just a key in my own hand. A roof that belonged to no one else. 4 windows facing the forest, and the first breath I'd taken in years that didn't feel borrowed. The silence here isn't lonely. It's safe. I planted herbs along the back porch, fixed the porch step that creaked, started writing letters to the families of the men and women I served with, just to tell them one more story, one more memory before time buried them. I wake up now to birds instead of shouting. I drink coffee from a chipped mug that doesn't match anything. And I don't miss their approval. Not anymore. Because I have something better. A life that I built, alone. And that's not sad, it's sacred. And when I think about that house, my old house, I don't feel fire in my chest. I feel distance, I feel perspective. I was called a poor soldier, dismissed like a stranger. But now I'm the only one still standing on solid ground. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. I didn't fight back. I just made one call. And somehow, that was enough. Captain Alana Brooks.